Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Playbook with yours truly, Joe Trahan, and the one and only, the great Ed Werder. Hey, Ed, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Joe. Enjoyed that game yesterday. It was probably the best example of complementary football, offense and defense that we've seen to this point in the season. How much of it was the opponent and how much of it was the Cowboys doing some things better on defense remains to be seen in my mind.
Yeah, the complimentary football, the complete game. We finally get a chance to see what that Cowboys offense can do when the defense keeps it on somewhat of an equal footing. Now, listen, as you alluded to, um, the fact that the top three receivers, were not there for the Commanders, and Terry McLaurin, Debo Samuel, and of course former Cowboy Noah Brown. I just it's hard to grade it, Ed. So let's start there. How'd you go about assessing and grading the Cowboys' defensive performance?
Well, in addition to what you said about Washington missing its top three receivers in the game, the Cowboys knocked Jaden Daniels out on the first possession of the second half while taking the football away. And then Marcus Mariota comes in, and he started two games earlier this year and played pretty well, but throws a pick six under pressure to Deron Bland. It was like 2023 all over again. Deron Bland running one back against Washington for his record that year, his fifth touchdown. But I thought it was interesting, talking to Jerry at length after the game, um, away from his media group, but a handful of people walked him to the elevator. He takes back up to the suite and did that for a couple purposes. Mainly, I wanted to know what the latest was on Trevon Diggs. But defensively, the thing that Jerry was making a huge point of, and of course, it flatters Jerry when he's talking about Brian Schottenheimer and the great job he did as a head coach and the investment he made. Not only coming up with his offensive script and game planning and preparing to call the plays on offense, but the amount of time he invested in meeting with the defense, with defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus and the coaching staff to try to come up with some solutions, for a defense that was ranked last in the NFL. And yesterday they used, blitzes at the highest level, highest rates that they've used all year. They played man coverage at the highest rates they've played all year. Of course, maybe you're more willing to get up in the face of receivers who are the fourth, fifth, and sixth receivers on somebody's team rather than the first, second, and third receiver. I mean, I think Washington played without $25 million at the wide receiver position yesterday.
Yeah,
That wasn't
and you're just not afraid that they're going to run by you,
right,
right? When they're fourth, fifth, and sixth on the depth chart, you're
right.
just
But
that fear goes away, from a play calling standpoint for Matt Eberflus, and even for those Cowboy defenders who are out there having to face those receivers.
yeah, so we'll see if they continue with this approach. But it was effective yesterday, and we can discount it or we can be skeptical about the improvement because they said the same thing right after they beat the Jets. We took a step forward, and then they go to Carolina and they can't stop the run. And Rico Dowdle has a record performance against them. So they did stop the run yesterday. I think it helped also, talked about complimentary football. The Cowboys scored on their first possession, which they haven't done often this year. So they played from ahead. It was kind of the old 2023 Mike McCarthy, Dan Quinn 12-win formula. Get
Yeah.
ahead, hunt the quarterback, create takeaways. And so it was all very effective in this particular game. But now they've got to carry that forward and build on that. And whether they do or they don't remains, to be determined and will be determined by them.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, we'll say this. A couple of things that stood out to me that I really liked, and it was, the fact that you mentioned they got embarrassed against Rico Dowdle and the Panthers, and they had the appropriate response. They played, especially that defensive line. They played with force. They played with intensity, veracity. I mean, they brought it early in that game, and Bill McCroskey Merritt did next to nothing when it mattered. They completely bottled him up, and even when Jalen Daniels was trying to get some runs early in the game, there wasn't much room for him to operate on the ground as well. So I thought that really set the tone for the defense to have a successful day all around. So I really like that. And then the other thing, when you look at more of the film, you could tell that it just felt like a more coordinated effort, right? In
Yeah.
terms of the way the defensive backs were setting up, the leverage that they were playing with, the way that they were funneling receivers when it came time to do so. We saw on several different occasions when they would have the proper leverage, funnel the receiver to where they had help. They would rally up and make tackles and get off the field. That's defense in the NFL, especially when you have those some of those 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9s, that they created because they played so well against the run. And that's just it's what you want to see, and it's been rarely seen so far this season. So I mean, I don't want to take that away from them. Even if they were playing against backups, it just felt more coordinated and it felt more technique sound. Again, easier to do when you
It
don't have to
is.
pressure
Right.
somebody
That's
running
my
past.
guy. I got him. That's
Yep,
your guy. You got him. You're not,
yep,
oh, if he comes in here, then I got this guy. What if they both come in here? Who's taking the second guy? Yeah,
yep.
it's a lot simpler for sure. But maybe Matt Eberflus learned something about being more flexible under the circumstances with the personnel they have, and they're going to get some guys back. I mean, I think we do forget not only the injuries and the players they're missing, but they were playing some young guys at corner, yesterday. We talked about Washington missing people. Well, because Trayvon Diggs was out, because Malik Hooker's out, Wanye Thomas was out. They were playing some young people back there. And then you just look at the defense overall, and you talked about it, the pressure on the quarterback and the takeaways. The first takeaway was the result of Shamar James getting his first sack, strip sack, big turnover. Cowboys converted that. And then later on, Donovan Ezaraku got his first sack. So they're starting two rookies, neither of whom's a first round pick.
Right.
And so you would expect those two players to become significantly better over the course of time as the season evolves. And then maybe they get, DeMarvion Overshown back, Ravel's coming back. They're all on their 21-day windows now. We can talk about that later, but Jerry's talked about helps on the way, and there is how good Overshawn will be, how many plays he can withstand, and what kind of dynamic ability he has right from the start after a second major knee surgery remains to be seen. And Ravel's coming off a major knee surgery and has never played at this level, so can't count too much on them. But it could create some interesting decisions for them in terms of playing time, and maybe they do become a little more dynamic and a little more athletic on that side of the ball over time.
No, that's an interesting part of it, and that actually kind of leads to the next talking point, the next conversation topic, because with some of that young talent getting on the field and showing that they can do some things, uh, I'm curious what you think in terms of what Jerry should do as the trade deadline nears and what he will do as the trade deadline nears to improve that defense.
Yeah, so the trade deadline is the 4th. They have two more games. They play at Denver this week, then they play a Monday night home game against Arizona, then the trade deadline, and they're at the Raiders. And that's, I think, the target date to get Ravel ready, get Overshown ready. So yesterday, Jerry talked about the value of those first-round picks acquired in the Micah Parsons trade. It's pretty clear to me that they could still use some help on defense. Now,
Sure.
Jerry said that there's not an offer in front of him right now that he considers viable and worth consideration. Doesn't mean there won't be sometime in the next 2 weeks. My concern is I can understand why you wouldn't want to invest in a team that's not necessarily assured of making a playoff run. And maybe it's too early to, if they win the next two games, then I think you have to be of a belief that, yeah, they can make the playoffs, right? They're second in the division now. If they get to 5-3-1, I would tend to be willing to invest if I was Jerry, especially as well as the quarterback is playing, as well as the points you're scoring on offense on a consistent basis. Those guys are as good as it gets in the NFL right now. And so if I had an opportunity to get a pass rusher or an elite corner, I would probably be, or a linebacker is another position I think they could use a player. I would probably, if they're 5-3-1, they win these next two games, which is no short thing by any means. I would probably be willing, if I was Jerry, to consider that possibility. They say they'll be open to the idea. The problem is they don't want to initiate anything. Like, they don't want to call the Raiders on Max Crosby. They don't want to call the Dolphins on, Bradley Chubb, because they think instantly the price goes up and it makes them unaffordable and puts them in a position where if they want the player, they have to overpay. And they don't want to overpay. They want to underpay. So, just make an equitable deal if it's going to help your team.
Thank you so much, because that's the point I'm going to make, Ed. Spend the money, Jerry, under the cap. Make the move. Because here's the deal. This is the best offense in the NFL right now, right? And the defense is like a boat anchor dragging them down. Give them an opportunity to play on equal footing. And if it only gets you into the playoffs and maybe even around deep, so be it, right? That way this team gets to soak up some experience, and you never know what's going to happen in terms of is George Pickens going to stay around? Is that offense going to continue to be this juggernaut where then in the offseason you can add another piece or two and all of a sudden you're a bona fide contender. So make the smart move. There are plenty of players out there when you look at the possibilities. I mean, listen, Trey Hendrickson from Cincinnati, he might not be the guy. But I mean, when you go a little bit further and you look at other options like a defensive back like a Tariq Woolen or a defensive lineman like a Carl Granderson from the Saints. I mean, there are some smart moves that you can make, but I would say, regardless, spend the money. The
Well,
offense is doing what it needs to do to compel you to spend the money to make the move to let them play on an equal footing. Don't don't end up like you've been before because you and I both know this. You know this, Ed. What is the biggest regret from Cowboys owner Jerry Jones in football terms? It's the fact that he didn't do enough to get Tony Romo and Jason Witten a better opportunity to win a Super Bowl. So don't not do enough. And listen, I'm not saying that this is a Super Bowl contender at all. What I am saying though is with a defense with a couple of pieces added and those players coming back who are going to be more healthy, I do think they'd be a playoff contender.
well, I think it's like, don't do to Dak Prescott what you did to Tony Romo, which, as you said, Jerry admits is his greatest regret as a general manager and team owner. He had 10 years of high level quarterback play
Yep.
from a guy they invested nothing in terms of a pick, an
Right.
undrafted quarterback, almost like unheard of that would happen. And then you replace him with a fourth round quarterback who's just as good for 10 years, maybe better.
Right.
And you don't get him enough opportunities. And keep in mind, Jerry and Steven and Will, keep in mind what you did to the defense at the start of the season. You compromised your defense. You traded a generational pass rusher for future considerations and Kenny Clark, right? And Kenny Clark's a good player, but he's not by definition Micah Parsons. That's why they had to give you more. They had to give you 2 first-round picks because it's not an equal trade. So invest, be mindful of the way you crippled the defense, and don't be surprised when it doesn't rise to the level that's lets the offense win like it should.
And here's the other issue, Ed. Stop trying to win the deal all the time. Stop trying to always have the upper hand. Stop trying to use the hammer all the time. Just make a fair and square deal that's equitable for both parties, get your team better, and give yourself a better opportunity to make a playoff run. It
We're not
shouldn't be that difficult, but you and I both know it will be.
well. We're going to know for a couple of years who won the Micah Parsons trade, but he did have 3 sacks yesterday, and the Packers
Yeah.
won on the road against the Cardinals, and 2 of those sacks came on the final 2 possessions of the game when the Packers were protecting the lead. So nobody's going to know what the ultimate outcome of that trade. We already think you won. We've already given you the George Pickens trade, right?
Right.
So
Yes.
even if he doesn't stay beyond this year, now given the investment you made the guy, and given the performance and the compatibility with both the quarterback and the other receiver, you should probably invest in keeping this guy almost no matter what it takes.
No
Um,
doubt. And you bring up another good point, Ed, because here's the deal. Not only did they win the Pickens trade, but they also made perhaps one of the best offseason acquisitions in the entire league in Javonte Williams. So you made good, sound decisions that didn't cost you a whole lot of money, that didn't cost you a whole lot of cap room. So use some of it now. Don't try and keep the powder dry. No, just go and do it and let it play out. And again, make the moves shrewd enough that if they don't push you over, the line this year, that you still got them around to make your team better in the future. I just don't get why it's got to be that hard, other than the fact that I know the Cowboys love to win the deal
right.
every time.
To me, it's just like who's available, what's the price, and how much do you believe in the team you have in terms of making the postseason this year. At the time you have to make that decision. Like, are they 3-3-1? Are they 4-3-1? Are they 3-4-1? Are they 5-3-1? Like that makes a difference to me.
Well, it's interesting because I do think, or I wonder how much the belief in this team has changed with the way this offense has quickly become a juggernaut,
Yeah.
right? Because I think we all thought that this offense could be pretty good. I don't know if anybody had it as the most productive offense in the entire NFL. I really don't, because I don't think anyone thought that Dak would be playing this well, even
Right.
if they thought he could play well. with better talent around him. I think we all thought that, but I don't think anyone thought that he'd be playing, this good. And that's the other thing about not having a defense, a better defense. It's a shame. I mean, Dak Prescott is playing at an MVP caliber level, but even I say at just 500, I can't give you the MVP, bud.
They didn't give it to Joe Burrow last year with what he did. He
Right,
led the NFL in passing yards and touchdowns, but his team finished 9-8. They didn't make the playoffs, and he was fourth
right.
in the MVP voting. And you're right. I think you make a good point about what the expectations were for Dak Prescott. I mean, I know Brian Schottenheimer in the offseason was asked, what he's expecting, and he said, I expect Dak to lead the NFL in wins. Well, to do that, to meet that expectation, you have to give him a whole team, not half a team. And remember, at the time he was coming off a second major injury, a second abbreviated season in 5 years, and he was playing the worst football of his career when he was hurt. So who could have expected him at 32 to come back and play at this level every week? Joe, every week.
And he doesn't even have half of a team. He's got like a quarter of a team because he's done it without his best receiver, with a turnstile at the offensive line, 9 different guys starting at the offensive line position. I mean, what he's doing has been ridiculous. So, hey, Jerry, reward your quarterback. It's the hardest position in the league. He's been playing his butt off. Reward him by getting better defensive talent so that your team can have a better go each and every week. We got the glimpse of what it can be when you give them equal footing. Well, let them go. Let them do it. Let's see how good this thing can become. And I just, man, I hope I'm wrong. I just don't see him, doing enough, Ed. We'll see. We'll see. I don't know. And to button it up, do you think Jerry will do what's right?
Again, I don't know what their record's going to be.
Yeah.
At the time they have to make that decision, and to me that plays a lot into it. I think he's really going to be reluctant to give up any of those first round picks. I think he really treasures those, and I could understand where you see it like, geez, we just can't with this deal. As much as it might help us on defense, I still don't trust that it's enough, to give us a viable team to make a real run any more than those 12-win teams did. Let's just rebuild the defense in the offseason with our 2 first-round picks this year and our 2 first-round picks next year. Let's use our money, available cap space to, re-sign Javonte Williams and re-sign Pickens, and let's use our draft resources to build our defense, because they did that once before when they hired Dan Quinn. They drafted almost entirely for defense, and it paid dividends. They were a top 3, 4, 5 defense 3 years in a row. I thought it was interesting this week with all the defensive crisis that Jerry acknowledged. Hey, part of this is my fault as a general manager, because I'm the one who put us in a position where we had to have 3 different defensive coordinators in 3 years, because guess what? I didn't have a plan of succession if I moved on from Mike McCarthy, which obviously he fully expected to do.
Yeah, and listen, problematic, and unfortunately the lack of that long-term plan just gives, those of us who think there needs to be someone else in the general manager's chair more fodder for it, Ed, because listen, I know it's not going to happen, but that's what the general manager does. That's what he should do. I mean, you can't just, you can't do this thing day to day. And
You
the
don't
more I've
just
been
spitball it.
right, and the more I've been around this team, unfortunately, Ed,
Well,
that's the
yeah.
that's what I come back to. I'm like, man, are they just kind of Jerry was so successful flying by the seat of his pants back in the day. He's made billions and billions of dollars doing it. He won 3 championships doing it. He's like, hey, that's how I roll. What? Get, I win championships this way. And I'm like, man, is he just still doing it that way today? And I just feel like there's too much parity. You just can't do it that way anymore. You can't just out talent teams anymore. It's not how the league works. And I feel like there is still an element of that. And listen, Will McClay and Stephen Jones would probably say, "What are you talking about? That's not how we do it." But sometimes
Well,
it feels like that. It feels like that, if nothing else.
I think when he, had Jason Garrett for 10 years and didn't have a clear vision for what he was going to do when he moved on from Jason. And then he had Mike McCarthy for 5 years. And at the end of last season, instead of like making a definitive decision, all right, that was it. Green Bay, we lost. That was the worst playoff game we've ever had. We're never winning with this group. Let's start over. and going that route. Instead, he's like, well, let's give him one more shot, but I'm not going to invest anything in this roster. I'm only going to let people leave, and I'll at least at worst, we'll get good draft picks. We'll have a bad year, but I'll make him earn his money, right? And even then, at the end of the year, he thinks he's going to bring him back. He's going to bring him back again, but he wouldn't give him more than 2 years, and Mike wasn't going to do it for 2 years.
And just that whole iteration of how that played out was just, I mean, unbelievable. And again, I don't think that there's enough regard given for the fact that some of those decisions, they don't just retard your progress for 1 year. There's a carryover effect when you make some of those decisions. And I think that's, part of what we're dealing with, and part of the reason why you had 3 defensive coordinators and, over this time span in the last 3 years. So,
the amazing thing is they value the offensive part of it so much, right? The continuity on offense, oh my God, no, I'm not going to bring back McCarthy. I don't want to change the system on my quarterback. He's 10 years into this deal. He's playing at a high level. We score a lot of points. He's a great player in this system. I want to keep the system. What do I got to do? Oh, Schottenheimer's about to leave the organization to go be a play caller for somebody else. Well, let's keep him. Well, what about why isn't the same philosophy applied to the defense?
Right. No, it's a great point. It's a great point. And it's just hard to figure out sometimes. I think there's a lot more apathy now that I've heard from just, and again, small sample size from my friend group. I think there's more apathy now because I think the fact that some of these decisions feel like they're not well thought out has really worn on Cowboys Nation, right? But I don't want to be completely negative, especially after a big win like that, because I do want to get your thoughts about this Cowboys offense. And we've talked about just how well Dak Prescott is playing, but I think the prospects for what you have, with CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens, because here's the deal. I mean, Ed, Cavante Turpin just made that one play, and it was kind of a flip out in the flat, and then he burns and
16 yards or whatever.
Yeah, in the blink of an eye. I mean, they didn't, and I think part of it was we don't need to do that. We don't have to do that this game. Why would we show that this game? I mean, there's still so much there, and the fact that Jake Ferguson, I mean, having the best start in the history of the NFL in terms of a tight end with production, 50 catches and 6 touchdowns in just 7 games. It's never happened. Never happened in NFL history. I mean, everywhere you look in this offense, I mean, there's nothing, but positives. I mean, the Cowboys scoring 40 points in their first 3 home games. That hadn't happened since 1973. I mean, it is just the superlatives are just off the charts with what Dak Prescott is doing. And as this group continues to get healthy, I mean, you got to project it to just continue to get better.
Yeah, and the longer they play together, which they really haven't played all that much together with all of their top players, because CD effectively missed 4 games. He went out early in the Chicago game, but and Turpin's been hurt. They still don't have their starting center back, and the starting center is a big piece of that offensive line.
Yeah.
But what I marvel at, and you're right, they lead the NFL in 400-yard games on offense. They lead the NFL in 40-point games this year. But Dak Prescott has thrown he's had 4 games with 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. No interceptions.
Yeah.
The only player who's done that more is Russell Wilson. He did it 5 times. So Dak, if he can do the same thing against a great Denver defense on the road this week, will match the NFL record. The only guys who have done it 4 times are the best there's ever been, like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees. That's it. That's who he's playing like. And they're 3-1.
I know. It's just there's something just so wonky about that. There's something that's so unbalanced and unfootball fair about that, to coin a phrase that I don't think exists. But I mean, it doesn't make sense in your football brain. But that's where we are with this team and the way it's been put together. And it is. I can't imagine being a Cowboy fan right now. How hard to stomach that must be. Wow. I don't get it. I don't understand it. But listen, it's fun to follow the circus, Ed. I do appreciate following the circus.
It's been a circus for 35 years. It's kept us gainfully employed most of the time, in my case, not all the time.
Yes.
Most of the time. And there's always something to write about, something to report about, something to talk about. But the thing, back to the offense, the thing that strikes me too is the effect that Brian Schottenheimer's had, the partnership that he's created with Dak Prescott, how aggressive he is at the end of halves to try to get, anytime there's a chance to get points, he's after it, right? They get sacked late in that drive, or they had that quick turn, 3-play touchdown drive right after Washington scored to make it 2015. They go down the field with a 40-yard pass to, Pickens, a 33-yard run. They're in the end zone again. But he's always hunting points. I like the fact that Dak's under center, that they've created some offensive balance. They have a play-action passing game. He's exceptional at that, one of the best in the league. Look at the numbers, including yesterday, like 7 for 9, 2 of the touchdowns. He's got 7 play-action pass touchdowns. I think only Matthew Stafford has more. So I think he's brought a new dynamic and a new identity to that part of the offense that makes them that much harder to defend when they do throw the football.
And I also think, and I hope I'm right here, I hope that Brian Schottenheimer, the play caller, learned a lesson against the Panthers, because I didn't feel like he was his usual aggressive self. In fact, it felt like he was trying to manage the game to try and keep his defense off the field as much, right? And the run wasn't working very well, and he just didn't stop. And I appreciate him, continuing to try and run, but at some point you've got to read the game. And it felt like this game, the response was, we're just doing what we do, especially having Lamb back. We're
Yeah.
just doing what we do. We're going to be aggressive, and we don't care what point of the game it is, what the situation is. We're going to be aggressive. And I think that's the recipe for this iteration of the Cowboys trying to win, because that defense is so bad.
Well, Rashadi talked about in the offseason, one of the things he wanted to do was he wanted to create more explosive plays on offense. And the Cowboys went into the game yesterday with Washington with 20 plays of 25 or more yards, the most in the NFL by 4. And then they added to that with the 74-yard touchdown by, CeeDee Lamb, the 44-yard catch by Pickens, the 33-yard run by Javonte Williams. So they extend their lead in that phase of the game. And that is how you score points in the NFL with those, as we saw. They put 2 of those explosive plays back to back. One of them is a touchdown right in and of itself. Then they put the other 2 together. That's another touchdown. I mean, it's amazing what they've been able to do on offense.
Yeah, no, it's fun to watch. As crazy as these games have been, and being 3-3-1, at least Cowboy fans are getting some measure of entertainment from that offense, because they just keep bringing it. And I'm curious to see what they'll do against the Broncos. Linebacker Dre Greenlaw will not be playing, by the way. That news came down today, as a matter of fact. How do you think that'll impact, if at all, that defense with the Broncos, Ed?
Well, Greenlaw would just play. He signed with the Broncos in free agency from the 49ers. Yesterday was his first game. Remember, he got injured in the pregame running onto the field against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And yesterday was his first game, so he was being managed. He played 21 snaps, but he still had 5 tackles and a quarterback hit. So he's a dynamic player who can affect the game. And the Broncos have the best pass rush in football. They have had it for the last 2 years. They've got 30 sacks through 7 games. That's the most since Kansas City had 35 in 7 games in 2013. So they're going to bring it. They've already beaten the Eagles on the road. They already beat the Giants yesterday. So they're 2-0 against the NFC East. You got to play them at altitude in a loud environment, and they're going to be they're going to be after your quarterback.
And it's going to be nuts, because they're coming off an absolute bananas victory over the Giants when they score 33 points. It's the most for a team that went into a fourth quarter with 0 points.
Yes.
I still can't believe they went in with 0 and they ended up winning with 33. But actually, the record for fourth quarter scoring is 34 points, and they came, within an eyelash of setting a new NFL record. So listen, they're going to be sky high. I think it's going to be a great environment. I'm actually going to be going to that game, Ed. So I'm looking forward to being in the house to see, how the Cowboys stand prosperity, right? They have easily their best game of the season from a complete and team standpoint, but can they stand prosperity? We've seen this team stumble so many times in this regard. I'm curious to see if they can handle that in the Mile High environment.
Can they get over 500? That's the big question. This is their second opportunity. They blew it in Carolina.
I know, right? Right? It's unbelievable. Well, listen, I do know this. Whatever happens, it will be interesting. And speaking of interesting, the fastest 30 minutes in sports is done, Ed. We did it again. That's the playbook. It's what we do. We give you tons of content. We yell, we scream, we have a blast. And that's 30 minutes for you here on WFAA Plus. Great job as always, Ed. Appreciate you, brother.
Thanks, Joe. See you Thursday.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week at 7 p.m. on Monday night for the playbook.